Hey everybody, this is Brett with the Indie Comic Dispatch. Joining me today is the author of It's a Living, Cristian. Welcome to the show. We're excited to have you on here and maybe talk a little bit about your freelancing career, being an artist, being a comic book creator, all that. So thank you for being here and welcome.
Well, thank you, Brett. It's a pleasure to be on the Comic Dispatch. And I've been watching it for several months now. And I'm always like fascinated about like all the stuff you have in the background there. So maybe someday we'll meet and I can like fiddle around and see what you got back there.
Definitely. If you're ever in Atlanta, man, let me know. So Cristian, you are a freelance artist and a comic book creator. Tell us more about yourself. What's your background?
Well, my background is, well, I am those things. And my background started in animation. So I studied animation in college. And then I worked in the field with a couple of companies. I worked with Ren and Stimpy creator John Crick on a show called Ripping Friends.
Okay.
And I got fired from a feature called Le Triplet de Belleville, which is like a very highly awarded like French animated film. But I got fired from it, and I got a good story about that some other time. And needless to say, I was sleeping on the job. But anyway, so I worked on that and a bunch of like TV shows. And then I just went on my own in 2002. I just wanted to work for myself. I thought I was going to be this kind of Picasso type artist. I didn't really know what my career would be like. I just felt like I had acquired a certain amount of education and now I was going to be an artist. Ultimately, I fell into online freelancing as a way to supplement the fact that I wasn't selling paintings in cafes and things like that.
Right. So let's talk about a little bit comic books for just a second. Hey everybody, this is Brett with the Indie Comic Dispatch. Joining me today is the author of It's a Living, Cristian. Welcome to the show. We're excited to have you on here and maybe talk a little bit about your freelancing career, being an artist, being a comic book creator, all that. So thank you for being here and welcome.
Well, thank you, Brett. It's a pleasure to be on the Comic Dispatch. And I've been watching it for several months now. And I'm always like fascinated about like all the stuff you have in the background there. So maybe someday we'll meet and I can like fiddle around and see what you got back there.
Definitely. If you're ever in Atlanta, man, let me know. So Cristian, you are a freelance artist and a comic book creator. Tell us more about yourself. What's your background?
Well, my background is, well, I am those things. And my background started in animation. So I studied animation in college. And then I worked in the field with a couple of companies. I worked with Ren and Stimpy creator John Crick on a show called Ripping Friends.
Okay.
And I got fired from a feature called Le Triplet de Belleville, which is like a very highly awarded like French animated film. But I got fired from it, and I got a good story about that some other time. And needless to say, I was sleeping on the job. But anyway, so I worked on that and a bunch of like TV shows. And then I just went on my own in 2002. I just wanted to work for myself. I thought I was going to be this kind of Picasso type artist. I didn't really know what my career would be like. I just felt like I had acquired a certain amount of education and now I was going to be an artist. Ultimately, I fell into online freelancing as a way to supplement the fact that I wasn't selling paintings in cafes and things like that.
Right. So let's talk about a little bit comic books for just a second. Have you always been a fan of comic books, or have you, what was your first comic book?
Yeah, I have always been a fan of comic books. I kind of have like, well, I wasn't born in Canada, so I wasn't introduced to comics until I came to Canada around the age of 9. And then I remember my first one. It was like an Action Comics 594 or something. It was like Booster Gold beats the living hell out of Superman. And that just fascinated me. because I knew Superman. You kind of hear about him as a kid. And then there was that, and there was like a Master of Kung Fu with Paul Galassi art,
Yeah.
where I used to redraw like the Bruce Lee with the abs and everything. I used to redraw that. That's how I learned anatomy. That was my first anatomy lesson.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so I always liked comics. And then while I was in high school, yes, I did self-publish, but right at like my last year, I remember thinking in my head, like, all I want to do is finish high school and draw comics. And that's really as far as I thought.
Right. That's awesome. That's awesome. So you just told your history. You ended up internet freelancing in this modern economy, and even more with the global pandemic going on. Freelancing and independent contracting employment seems to be the thing. For better or for worse, that's where a lot of people are at. Doesn't seem to be going anywhere anytime soon. So what are your thoughts on freelancing and doing it successfully?
Wow. Well, I have a lot of thoughts on it because I wrote a book.
You literally wrote the book.
I wrote the book, yeah. Well, I mean, for me, this is the way I look at freelancing. I look at freelancing as a way for me to buy my time to do my own kind of artistic searches, So I'm an artist, and that's really the way I see myself. Like, and the freelancing is just like, I mean, you have to make a living, and if you're an artist, you have to use those same skills to make a living. That's the way I want to do. Because I figure, like, as long as I both my jobs are art, then I will be remembered as an artist. I don't want to be remembered as half burger flipper and half artist.
Right.
And trust me, at the beginning of my career, I did try that. Like, I tried to have a day job, what people consider a real job.
Right.
And then suffer, and then not moonlight to do my passion.
Mm-hmm.
So that wasn't for me. It was too painful, and I had too much pride. And actually, I mean, I struggled for 4 years, like early in my career, and I was so nuts in that time. I love to kind of think about this period, but I was so nuts in that time that I would sometimes tell people that I am willing to die. I'm willing to starve and die to be an artist.
Mm.
So I would meet people, and I'd be like, I'd have like the whites of my eyes showing, and I'd be very intense in that time, and I was just determined.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of have to do that. So freelancing is a means to still be an artist. So now I'm advanced enough in my career that when I help other creators create comic books or do commissions, I sometimes am able to negotiate a percentage of profits. So I have something invested. I usually don't negotiate stake in their company unless it's like very early stages and we develop something together.
Right.
But I have a stake of royalties in a lot of cases. So I'm still an artist there, and I can promote those projects with pride. So to kind of backtrack now to your original question, yeah, I mean, everybody is a freelancer now. And actually, I don't know if you were going to bring this up later, and this is going to be a long answer, but one of the things that I was wondering about is, I think the industry is going to get even bigger.
Yeah.
Because what about those DC and Marvel layoffs?
Right.
What are those guys going to do?
Yep. Yep.
Where are they going to go?
Yep. Yep. I was going to say indie comics during this time has just exploded. People making their stuff online. So I think that's just going to continue, and freelance artists in particular are going to be even more in demand.
Yeah. Yeah, they're going to be in demand among themselves. And I think like the more organized and the farther along creators, they'll have the opportunity to create companies that overtake, Marvel and DC and I mean, I have bad thoughts sometimes, and I sometimes want companies to fail. It's kind of the American way. You build these companies up and then you try to rip them apart.
Yep. You're right.
It's the American way.
I have a love-hate relationship with Amazon. That's Amazon's wonderful. I hate Amazon. It's the same way with Marvel and DC. You're right.
Yeah. So I think freelancing is going to be very in demand. The key thing, because I was thinking about this, the key thing for these people that initially they came out of school, they have a master's in whatever it is, comic book marketing, because I'm sure there's courses of that.
I'm sure there are.
So they have they get some editorial job. They're experts already. They've done nothing, but they're experts. So they get a good salary, one of these big corporations, tons of meetings. You're just in meetings. You go, how easy is this? I just listen and talk, and now they have to hustle and be their own boss, and they have to regiment themselves and hustle for sometimes much lower pay. Yeah. Actually, most often hourly, freelancers make more than employees.
Right.
That's statistically proven. So, but to get those jobs is extra work. You're not counting like all the free hustling you're doing.
Right.
So that's really, I think, the challenge. And I mean, there's my book, which is It's a Living. And then there's I guess there's other ones, but not as good as mine. but I mean, you need if you're stuck and you need to get into the freelancing industry, I mean, and you thought your whole life was going to be working for some employer, you were going to like you're living in the 40s and 50s, right, where you make your career with one company and then you retire in the house that you bought in your 20s.
Yeah.
This is like a different world. I mean, everybody knows it's a different world,
But some people aren't acting like it with their employment. I mean, we know it, but some people still have that thought, and then they end up out on their butts and no job and don't know what to do. So that's very tough. There was something in me that I always didn't want that. And I feel like when I was freelancing in animation studios, there was still kind of the hustle between studios having work, and you always had to kind of beg somebody, or well, not really beg somebody, but you had to know people, right,
and be good enough and reliable, and then get in. Sometimes up to a year at a time, you'd get a contract, and you didn't have to kind of hoard your nuts, and then and you're good for a while until other work opens up, but yeah, it's a tough world, and I kind of feel bad for this new generation, because I feel most employers don't want to pay benefits. Right. Yeah. It's risky for corporations to overstaff. They realize it because something like this pandemic could happen.
Yeah.
And then they're stuck. They Disney World closed down, movies. None of those things that are all their big money makers are available. So
yeah,
so why overstaff? And then creative people, which can sometimes be more emotional, can have a harder go without security. And so the main, you'll probably lead to this, but one of the main challenges is to get yourself in a state of mind where this is normal, and you could survive in this environment.
Yeah, and that is exactly my next question for you was going to be, what's the hardest part of deciding to go full-time freelancing? And so do you think it's putting yourself in the right frame of mind, or is there other things that's hard?
The hardest part is the money. One, if you're an indie creator, you have to raise money to make your project. Then, once you've made the project, you have to spend money and spend extra time to make that money back and more. So, money is kind of like a very important aspect. And if you are not 100% committed, and that's a key to having a successful go at it, if you're not 100% committed creatively to this goal of being an artist in the grandest sense of the word, it's going to be very painful for you to have to do those administrative tasks. And they're administrative tasks, like writing a Kickstarter campaign, like all those, like hours and hours, weeks of work just to put up a campaign.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I've heard that from so many creatives. I've never done a Kickstarter campaign, but that's the recurring theme, is that Kickstarter campaign is way more work than you ever think it's going to be.
Yes. And then you're promoting it every single day. It's like full-time work. So if you're not committed 100%, those admin tasks are going to be, like I said, painful. And that's really the breaking point for most artists. That's where they want to take a full-time job, sometimes doing anything but, because they're so intimidated by the work involved, and I don't know, I kind of like, it's almost like danger, it's like somebody's telling you, like, this is really hard and you might even die, and I'm like, like I was early in my career, I was like, I'm ready to die,
Give me that. Yeah. That sounds dangerous. Cool. Let's do it.
Yeah. Cause it's like, it's noble,
Right.
I always like to be the first in any, even physical challenge, like if somebody says like, go climb those rocks or something like that. I like to be the first. Cause even if I tumble down those fucking rocks, like at least like people were like, well, hey, he tried it,
Right.
Right.
He gave it his all.
Yeah, he's brave. So I don't know. I mean, yeah, that's the challenge. It's like balancing, money and the time that you need to devote to it, and going 100%.
Yeah. Yeah, man, that is tough. I didn't even really think about that. All the little administrative tasks you're going to have to do when you're trying to focus on art.
Yeah.
So now you have this book, It's a Living, which you should go buy if you're watching this. All sorts of great advice. I didn't read the full book, but I perused it, selected chapters, read it through, and got some really solid, great advice in there, man. But you also have a comic. Tell us about that.
Yes, I have a Big Boss comic, which is the same Instagram, and it's 2 graphic novels. One is the original, which was a 5-issue miniseries compiled into 120 pages. And that's Big Boss Gun for Hire. That's volume 1. And volume 2 is Big Boss Comic, which was actually, it's called that because it was drawn on Instagram, a panel at each day. So, so the premise of the graphic novel is world famous assassin. There's a lot of assassins in America.
Yeah.
So, and they're all very deadly. So, so world famous assassin finds out he's got a daughter he never knew about. He's kind of like more established. So, and she's out to kill him now. So she surfaces out of nowhere, out to kill him. She and her lover get between him and the biggest contract of his life. He kind of wants to retire with this one, So they get between and they lure him into this very emotional and very deadly showdown. So that's like the premise of the first graphic novel. And the second one kind of continues with his gigging, and it's got a lot more action and some plots and so forth.
Very good, very good. And we'll link both those in the notes below this so that you can go to Christian's main page for Masterpiece Art School or to that comic page too. So as a freelancer and a comic book creator, you're both. What do you think is the hardest part of bringing a comic project to life?
Let me. Oh yeah. Sorry, because I had notes and I don't want to miss anything. Because
No, you're good.
But hardest part of bringing up, well, the hardest part is it's a little abstract, but I see like I see a lot of like writers that want to have comic books, and they have to hire artists. So one thing that I've thought about a lot, because this is what my freelancing consists of in the last few years, especially because I started like, when I started online, I was doing a lot of different types of jobs, like the, logo designs and things like that. Anything that like was anywhere close to my oeuvre. And then eventually I could turn down those jobs and focus back on comics. And then so in the last few years, I almost exclusively, unless I have repeat clients that come back sometimes from a few years ago, I don't turn them down, but like I exclusively seek and work for mostly indie self-publishers, small presses, creating comics. And I, sometimes it's just with a writer, I'm helping him with the project. Sometimes it's a small team. Sometimes I create the team. So one thing that I recommend to writers that are looking for artists and they want to hire them is to think like a publisher. And I think that's what they don't do. They think they like to think that they think like a collaborator, but it's not, because as long as money is being exchanged, no matter how much, it's not a collaboration, and disputes will happen, and you have to make contracts. I don't do any projects now without a contract,
Right.
Unless it's online and it's just like one gig here and there or something,
Right.
And the bigger the company, the longer the negotiations for the contract, and the longer the contract sometimes. So yeah, that's what I recommend that they actually do the research and save up their money to pay decent wages. So that's really the two things that I recommend for those are the kind of the hardest things, is to think like a business person, like a publisher, and to have an overall vision. And yes, you can have like friendly terms and friendships that come through business dealings, but if not you, then who the hell else is going to have kind of a larger scope and a business sense of your business endeavor, which is a comic book. It's a product. You're creating a product.
Right. Yeah. You can be nice and friendly, but protect yourself too.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So that's some of the stuff to look for of bringing a project to life. What are some of the pitfalls that you see people falling into, either freelancers or comic book creators or whatever, however you want to take the question, the pitfalls that you see people falling into that could be easily avoided and they just don't know it from lack of experience?
Okay. Pitfalls. Indie creators?
Yeah.
Well, over the years, I've done a lot of projects that don't go anywhere, That's the truth. And, even more recently, when I have like contracts where I have a residual income in the contract, that's kind of like, and I mentioned, and I write this in It's a Living, that like I use that as a strategy to sometimes justify like a rate rebate, So I'll go like, okay, I could lower the price, but you give me 20% back end, you know,
Right.
but it's really a negotiation tactic, really. It's really like, so they see benefits and they see compromise,
Mm-hmm.
you know? But in reality, I hardly ever see, like sometimes I'll see one or two payments initially,
Right.
because they're excited and they take it to a couple of conventions and they make like, you know, pretty good sales.
Uh-huh.
And then like, they just like, who knows what happens? They get down on themselves or something
Mm-hmm.
and they do nothing, you know, with it.
Yeah.
And it just sits there. And then they go, hey, you know, they check their website and they go, nobody's downloaded it, you know, like
Right.
why, you know? So that's like the biggest pitfall, you know, like you have to like not only picture your project like finished, but like you have to be prepared to market and promote the living crap out of it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
you have to believe in it enough for that, you know, like, and even if it's got its faults, like everything, you know, like you can be the greatest, you know, writer or artist in the world. And, you know, you sit down with them and you know they have regrets about their greatest works.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So that's the biggest pitfall, is like not doing enough with it.
Right. Jason Barrett of JBN Comics, he created a character named Heru. He said, you know, if you plan $50,000 to bring your book to life, plan another $50,000 to market it. He says,
Oh yeah, yeah,
otherwise, all your friends and family will have your books and nobody else will.
yeah.
So
He's
I
got
do.
50,000.
No, I just think that was a number he
Because I'd
pulled
like
out
to
of
talk to
it.
him.
Yeah, you should look him up. He's got some great stuff, but
Okay.
I don't think he has 50,000. So
But it's true.
yeah, equal amount of production to marketing. Otherwise, it's just going to sit there. It's not going to go anywhere. So there's a lot of writers out there. We've already talked about this, but there's a lot of writers out there looking for artists. You've already said some of the advice that you would give them. You know, the contract and acting like a publisher. But let's talk about pricing for a minute too, because a lot of people are out there thinking they can find an artist and maybe pay, you know, $200 and get their comic book drawn. And that is just simply not the case and not fair to the artist. So people are just oblivious to the cost of art. So what can writers who want to bring a comic book to life expect to pay for a single comic book page?
Well, that's a great question, Brett, because it's actually a very contentious subject in comics. Because even when you search for rates online, there's a couple of statistics, not really big samples. There's one, I forget what it's like, something resource. There's a sample size of about 200 professionals, and they show you the rates from like Marvel and every other like little smaller companies, Marvel, DC, and others. And they show you like writer rates, colorists, you know, pencil. So there's those rates, and Marvel and DC, they typically pay for pencils and inks for an artist like anywhere between like 300 to 500. That's what I recall.
A page.
And that, yeah, per page.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that our listeners out there get that. That's not for the comic book. That's per page.
Yeah, per page. Yeah, for typically pencils and inks.
Right.
So anyway, rates. This is kind of a long answer because rates. Then they go. Then you know it's indie stuff. So typically me. So I have several examples that come to mind.
Yeah.
So typically me, I don't like to accept any penciling and inking under like 125. Okay, that's like, you know, I mean, because the amount of time that it takes to the thumbnail to pencil and then ink is, I mean, geez, it can be easily like a solid 8 hours.
Right.
And so when you
break that down to an hourly rate, yeah, that's not that much.
Yeah, I should be flipping burgers, you know?
Right.
So that's like, you know, and so if I take a project like that, I'm like really I'm immediately trying to cut corners, and the client should understand that, you know, I have no time pressure as an artist, and then, you know, they don't have like unlimited revisions, especially not revisions. And there's different terminology, because I like to use the word edits or tweaks.
Yeah.
A revision is, I don't like what I wrote and I want to change the whole thing and I want you to redraw it. No, that's like, a whole new project.
Yeah, that's
a new bill.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's kind of like one of them. And then I have several examples. So I had one project that I took for a flat fee, and it was like really easy going. I actually spread it out like over 6 months. You know, I took my time with it. The guy never messaged me for, you know, like, is it ready? And no time pressure whatsoever. And it was a flat fee for around 700, which is not much at all. It breaks down to like, it was for 22 pages. And gosh, it was like, it broke down to like $30 before tax or something like that, you know?
Right.
You know, really, that's as low. That's when I'm hungry. When I got nothing on the table, I'll take everything and then spread it out. That's what freelancers do. That's kind of a freelancing lesson if you don't already know. So that's what you have to do. You have to say yes to everything, and then there's like little things that you could do, which I you know, iterate in the book, like when you take a small project like that isn't a lot of money, you have to update them immediately with like a knockout, you know, like right out of the gate. So they're like, they know that they've made the best decision of their life hiring you. And then they go, master, you know, you take your time, just keep it coming whenever you're ready.
Right.
You know, so within a couple of days, you have to boom, like knock it out of the park, give them like a couple of pages, you know, like you've started, you're excited, get them excited.
Right.
So that's kind of like the protocol for that. Then there's like the mid-tier indie comic for what you say, like a couple of hundred a page. But I did one where it was, and I overperformed generally because it's my name on the line.
Right.
So I did one where the contract was 300 a page, but that also took in coloring and lettering. So I outsourced the coloring.
Okay.
And then cover was a little bit more. And I took 20% royalty. So essentially with that product, I actually was art director. And then for a separate fee, it was like, I think 600 separate fee where I did layout and publishing to Comixology and handling printing, because I knew a printing company.
Yeah.
So I did that. So it was essentially a publisher's fee. I really acted as a publisher because I knew more about indie publishing than the writer. So that was the next tier. So it was a lot.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot.
And then, you know, I would go on interviews and plug that project, and I won't plug it today just so it's not connected, but yeah. So I give a lot, you know. They get a great value.
Yeah.
So the next tier. So that's like really minute. When you're hungry, you got to take a project and spread it out. And there's like middle tier, and this is really, I would aim for, if you're a writer trying to get your work published, I would not aim for less than this. I would save up for 300 a page and, you know, trying to account at least minimum, you know, and try to account like for coloring and lettering and all that, plus extra fees. There's always extra. And consider giving up some royalties back end if you want your artist to, like, you know, to not just be a jobber, to feel some sort of pride when they promote it, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great.
So then the next stage, which is closer to an industry rate, I don't get that often, which is the commercial job. And that's like, and I've gotten a lot of them actually, but I don't get them as consistently.
Mm-hmm.
So over the years, I've probably gotten like, well, if I'm truthful, maybe like a solid around 100 of these.
Okay.
You know, if I'm maybe a little less, like 80s or something. But and basically, what is it? It's like a small company, like let's say a doctor's office or like some coach, you know, or I had like a hair salon where they want a commercial comic with sometimes the owner as, you know, protagonist,
Right.
or other superhero characters that are like trying to, you know, through an action sequence promote their service.
Mm-hmm.
So that's actually a popular commission that I've gotten over the years. And sometimes it's just a poster, and that's typically the same rate if it's like a comic book cover with like a caricature type, you know, superhero character, or the full page ad.
Right.
So that is typically in the range of $575, $600, sometimes up to $750. So that's, and then that's coloring, lettering, everything, you know, preliminaries, communication, everything. So that's a comfortable rate.
That's
So
amazing. Just the variety of pricing that you just have to take into account. I think that illuminates a lot for me, but I'm sure for other people out there, it's really illuminating a lot for them too. Just they have this comic idea. Oh, I need to start saving some money. Like that's amazing. Because you want quality work. You want somebody like yourself working on your book. And so, you know, like take the time, save the money, invest in yourself so that you can invest in a good artist or in your book ultimately. If you're listening out there, take the time to invest. If you got this idea, great, do it. But take the time to invest in yourself and save that money so you can invest in an artist. Cristian, it's been great having you on here. So much great advice, so much great talk. Tell people if they want to keep on getting that great advice, where can they get your book at?
They can get it on Amazon directly from Jeff Bezos.
I will find that link to go directly to your book, and I will link it in my link tree on Instagram. So if you're watching this, just head on over to our profile. When the video is done, click on that. You can get to the book right there from my page. Cristian, thank you again. This has been great. I have enjoyed the time. Let's stay in touch, and you know, let's educate some people out there about what it takes to produce a book in this day and age.
Yeah, at least 3 years.
Yeah,
for that one. So yeah, thank you, Brett. It's been an absolute pleasure. So thank you.
Great. Thank you. See you guys next time.